Let's continue our discussion of the environmental analysis part of market sensing. Previously, we focused on demographic analysis, and let's continue with that right now. The first concept that I want to discuss with you is that of a generational cohort. And a cohort is really just a group. So when we're talking about a generational cohort, it's a group of people or individuals that were raised in the same time period, and therefore they went through the same cultural experiences. And those same cultural experiences might make them need different products or services or react similarly to different products or services. So we're going to use the reference provided by the Pew Research Foundation. And you may have heard of some of these cohorts. The Depression generation was born before 1946. The baby boom generation that you probably hear a lot of now was born between 1946 and 1964. These people grew up in a very healthy economy post-World War II, and nuclear families where there was a mom and a dad both present in the household were typical. They were encouraged to express their individualism. Generation X was born between 1965 and 1980, and they were really the first generation that was raised in single-parent households or where both parents worked outside the home. So they came home and maybe fixed themselves a snack, and products like macaroni and cheese that you previously had to boil the water on the stove and combine were redesigned so that it was easy for kids to pop in a single serve container and put this after school snack in the microwave. The millennials were born between 1981 and 2000, and they're the first generation to come of age in this new millennium. Basically, we call them digital natives because they're very comfortable using any type of digital technology, whether it be smartphones, tablets, computers, etc. They don't have to be taught how to use those. It's just natural, or they're a native in that environment. They're also raised in a time where violence, terrorism, and drugs became realities of life. So they might buy products and services that help them to stay connected with other people. They also accept all the different racial and ethnic backgrounds much more than previous generations did. If you click on this link here, it's very interesting. You can come to another article where it speaks in greater detail about the millennials and some of the characteristics of them of being more ethnically and racially diverse than before. They record behaviors like tweeting and texting and social media as typical. Very interestingly, they're also the least religiously observant youths. So this particular article you can access through the slide, and you can see information about all these generational cohorts and how they might respond similarly to different products and services marketed to them. So we were talking about the Pew Research Foundation, and I just wanted to bring up this slide. You can see the location right here. And this gives you some different topics, different social topics on which the Pew Research Foundation does study. So, if you wanted to look at changing American attitudes about parenthood, for example, or changing views about home ownership, because obviously if you're selling something that deals with home ownership or building of homes or something, how people value and their changing social values affects the demand for those products. So again, this list just continues, and you can see many examples here of changing studies. What are American values about retirement or about student loans? I mean, colleges and universities market themselves to students, and many students now, because of their changing attitudes about students' loans, are very cautious about going to a costly private university where they could go to a public or a community college, come out and be making the same income and have much lower level of costs of attending college. So these are just some examples about some of the social and cultural trends that the Pew Research Foundation studies. As an example, let's look at the Pew research on changing American attitudes toward parenting and the way fathers and mothers spend their time and how that's changed over the last century. So, interestingly enough, since 1965, mothers have almost tripled the amount of paid work that they do each week, but they still are behind fathers in terms of paid work that they do. Meanwhile, if you look at fathers, they have increased the amount of time that they spend on housework and childcare over time, but they still only do about half of the childcare and household work that mothers do. So this explains why products that are used for household care and taking care of kids and the family are most often marketed towards mothers. And this particular thing shows, for example, how in most two-parent households today, both parents work outside the home at least part-time. So they spend about the same amount of hours when you add in childcare, housework, and paid work working, although again illustrating how fathers spend less time in childcare and housework than do moms. Both working moms and working dads, say that balancing work and family is hard for them to do and that they always feel rushed. This again explains why many products and services are marketed or promoted as being able to make your life easier or to handle all this activity that you're doing. Sorry, I hit the wrong button there. This explains more moms are wanting to work part-time, especially since the start of the recession. Unmarried mothers, in particular, say that they would like to be able to work full-time. When we ask about what's the ideal situation for kids, only about 16% of mothers feel that the ideal situation is for them to work full-time. We know in reality more do work full-time than 16%. So again, you can see many products and services who try to eliminate the role conflict or the guilt mothers might feel about working when they feel that it really would be best for them to not work full-time. Again, dads agree that it would be better to have a mom who works part-time, but the percentage of dads who say that it's better to not have a mom work at all has declined. So it's becoming more socially and culturally acceptable to have moms working. This kind of explains why people work and what they want, how much time they get with their kids. A good percentage of mothers feel that they spend too little time with their kids. A greater percentage of dads feel that they spend too little time with their kids. Again, you might see parents or promotions of dads spending quality time with their kids as a way to promote to those fathers. So I hope that this has illustrated for you a little bit about how America's attitudes about parenting have changed and how those changes in attitudes might affect demand for different products or services. Let's look at another attitude change, potty training. It's interesting, and if you think about how attitudes toward potty training have changed, you can see certain products for which this would affect the demand. Obviously, diapers, both cloth and disposable diapers, as well as things like pull-ups or even children's clothing. So let's look at how the attitudes of potty training have changed. In 1950, almost 100% of children wore cloth diapers, and 95% of children were trained by the age of 18 months. So the market for disposable diapers didn't even exist about 60 years ago. And obviously, because people didn't like caring for cloth diapers, that's probably, and washing all of those, it's probably one of the reasons kids were potty trained earlier. Just 30 years later, in 1980, about 50% of children wore cloth diapers, while the other wore disposable diapers, and only about 50% versus 95% of children were potty trained by the age of 18 months. Today, almost 90 to 95% of children wear disposable diapers. So the market basically for cloth diapers has declined to very small. And only about 10% of children are potty trained by the age of 18 months. Today, the average age for potty training is about 36 months, so basically 2.5 years. And so what kind of implications does this have on diapers, disposable diapers, etc.? Well, obviously the disposable diapers need to be made in much larger sizes. We see products like pull-ups for older kids that don't want to be wearing baby diapers. Now they can wear big kid pants instead. And one thing I might want to say is that the use of disposable diapers is increasing just slightly because of the natural environment concerns that we brought up in a previous lesson, that it is more eco-friendly supposedly to use cloth diapers than disposable diapers. And I've cited my source here just so that you can see that. So far we have discussed demographic, social, and cultural influences on marketing, all of those being in the external marketing environment. What I'd like to talk now about a little bit is global marketing influences. And we think about a company who wants to sell its products or services in another country. What kind of implications, what kind of special implications are there for global marketing? And probably one of the first things we need to think about are the different economies of different countries and the different economic influences. One economic influences is the concept of exchange rates. And so if you were to take a US dollar, for example, and take it to Europe and exchange it for a euro, for each dollar in America you have, you would get 72.72 euros. So a dollar doesn't exchange evenly for a dollar. Your dollar doesn't go as far in Europe when you buy products and services. If you were a European and you came to the United States, for every euro you brought over, you would get $1.38 here in the United States. So your dollar would stretch a little further. And that explains why after our recession in 2008, many Europeans were actually flying to New York City and shopping there for Christmas because they could combine a vacation with low airfares and the buying power of the euro in the States with their Christmas shopping. And you can see here the exchange rates for the Great Britain pound, the Indian rupee, the Australian dollar, the Canadian dollar, and there's more currencies available on this site as well. So one of the biggest influences to global trade or global marketing of products or services are just the fact that there are different economies and different exchange rates. Another major influence is what we would call political influence. And here, if a country produces goods and services itself, we would call that domestic products. If it imports products or services made in another country, we would call those foreign products. So if a country wanted to protect its domestic production of goods and services, one thing that it could do would be to tax the imports or the foreign products, and those taxes are called tariffs. And what that tariff does then, in essence, is increase the cost of the foreign product and therefore makes the domestic product more price competitive with the foreign product. Another concept of that would be the concept of a quota. In a quota here, we don't tax the imports, but we limit how much can be imported. And so when we limit the supply, and people really want that product, that means they're willing to pay more for it, which then means the price of our domestic goods are more price competitive with the price of the foreign good. Another major influence on global marketing, besides economies and political influences, are cultural influences. Just the way things are done in different countries. And I came across this particular website that I think it's kind of interesting. And he talks about, as he's traveled around, how people in different countries do things. And so he says when he went to Brazil, for example, that one thing that the first question he was asked when he would arrive at someone's home was whether they wanted to have a shower. It's considered to be polite to offer a guest who's visiting you if they want to have a shower, even if they're not spending the night at your locations. Brazilians like to freshen up. So again, maybe shower gel sells better in Brazil, or maybe disposable types of items that could be used in a shower might sell better there than in other countries. Here's another example. In Taiwan, if you hand out your business card to someone, you would never want to stuff it in your pocket. They accept it with both hands as if they're receiving a gift, and as if it's an extension of the person that's giving it to them. So definitely, if you were making sales calls in Taiwan, you would want to make sure that you presented your business card in a way that wasn't offensive to them. Here it talks about in the Philippines and in Colombia how they never point with their index finger. It's considered quite rude. Instead, there you use your lips to point to something. So these are just some examples of how people do things differently in different countries, and therefore they want different products or services. For example, Kentucky Fried Chicken fries different things in different cultures based upon what food they like there. McDonald's doesn't sell hamburgers in India because cows are considered sacred. So I hope that this review has helped you to see how generational cohorts and changing values and attitudes in our society and culture, as well as how different countries do things, are part of the external environment that we need to continually analyze to figure out how to market our products and services. Thank you.